All right, welcome. Settle in for another deep dive with us. Today, we're really getting into something that's, well, it's starting to fundamentally change the classroom.
Not just minor tweaks.
No, exactly. We're talking about how we understand learning itself. And we're doing this by unpacking a source called the educator's co-pilot, how AI delivers data-driven insights to transform teaching.
It's a great title, actually, co-pilot, because it really frames the idea that this isn't about, AI taking over teaching.
Right. It's about helping teachers, giving them tools, insights, based on data that they just haven't had before.
Precisely. So our mission today, for you listening, is to pull out the really key insights from this source. We want to explore what AI can do in education, according to this material, but also touch on the big questions it raises, the opportunities and the challenges.
Yeah, and we're going to structure this one a bit like a Q&A, following the logic laid out in the source material itself. We'll start with the before picture.
Yeah.
What were the problems? Then dive into how AI starts to address those problems. What does it actually do with the data?
What kind of insights does it generate? Things like tracking progress, spotting gaps.
Predicting problems even, which sounds pretty powerful.
It is. And then crucially, how does all this information actually empower teachers? What changes in the classroom?
And we can't ignore the flip side, the challenges, the ethical stuff, data privacy, bias.
Yeah.
All that needs to be on the table.
Absolutely. So think of us as your navigators through this source material, helping you make sense of this really significant shift.
Okay, let's jump in then. Before we get too excited about the AI solutions, the source does a good job of grounding us. It asks, what were the real limitations of traditional educational data? Why is getting a test back with 75% written on it just not enough?
Yeah, that's really the critical starting point. I mean, think about how it's worked for ages. Teachers use tests, quizzes, homework, plus their own, expert observations. That's the traditional toolkit.
And intuition, right. Good teachers have a feel for how students are doing.
Absolutely. And that human element is irreplaceable. But the data generated by that traditional system, when you look closely, has some serious shortcomings, especially now with the possibilities technology offers.
So what's limitation number one?
Well, the source points out that a lot of traditional data acts as a lagging indicator. Think about a unit test. Students study, they take the test, you grade it. Maybe it's a week, maybe 2 weeks later, those scores come back.
Right.
By that point, the class is probably already well into the next topic, so you find out how they did on fractions, but you're already teaching decimals or percentages. The moment to effectively intervene on the fractions part, it's often past.
So it's like getting a traffic report for yesterday's commute. Interesting, maybe, but not helpful now.
Exactly. It tells you where they were, not necessarily where they are in their current learning. It's fundamentally reactive.
Okay, so the timing's off. What else? That 75%.
Right. The second big issue is the lack of granularity. That 75%, what does it actually mean? Did the student bomb one whole section but ace the rest? Did they understand the core ideas but make loads of small calculation errors?
Or maybe they just didn't understand how a couple of questions were worded.
Precisely. Was it a problem with, say, understanding the concept of fractions itself? Or was it specifically difficulty with simplifying them? Or adding, unlike denominators, a single score just lumps it all together. It hides the specific nature of the problem.
So something's up, but you don't have the diagnostic info to fix it effectively. It's inefficient.
Terribly inefficient for targeted help. And then, adding to the complexity, you've got the problem of data silos. Information about a student's learning is often scattered everywhere.
How so?
Well, you might have formal grades in the school's main system. Then maybe there's an online platform for homework with its own data. Perhaps some notes from in-class activities are just in the teacher's notebook. Standardized test scores. That's another separate database.
Okay, yeah. It's all fragmented.
Totally fragmented. Trying to piece together a complete, holistic picture of how a student is doing across all these different contexts, it's often a massive manual effort, if it happens at all. You don't get that seamless view of their learning journey.
It's like trying to build a picture from puzzle pieces stored in different rooms of the house.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that leads directly to the final big limitation the source highlights. Manual analysis overload. Let's be real. Teachers have incredibly demanding jobs.
Absolutely.
The idea that they could realistically sit down and manually comb through every detailed answer, every interaction on a digital platform, every homework submission for, say, 30 students in multiple classes,
Forget it.
and somehow spot subtle patterns or diagnose individual misconceptions consistently, it's just not feasible with their current workload.
Yep.
The sheer volume of potential data points, even if you could gather them, is overwhelming for manual processing.
So let me recap the problems then. The data comes too late to act on effectively. It's too broad, doesn't tell you the specific issue, it's scattered all over the place, and there's simply too much of it for a human teacher to realistically analyze in depth.
It's a pretty accurate summary of the challenges the source lays out.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly. So if those are the problems, how does AI start to offer a solution? The source asks, how does AI begin generating these more useful insights? What's step one?
Right. This is where the AI platform starts acting like that co-pilot. It steps in to handle that data chaos we just talked about. The very first foundational step, according to the source, is comprehensive data aggregation.
Aggregation meaning pulling it all together.
Exactly. The AI system is designed to function like a central hub. It connects to and pulls data from all those different digital sources, ideally, simultaneously, and in real time.
What kind of sources are we talking about?
Oh, all sorts. The source mentions things like interactions with adaptive learning software,
Yeah.
the kind that adjusts difficulty based on how the student is doing, intelligent tutoring systems that provide step-by-step guidance, any automatically graded assignments or quizzes done online, even data from digital textbooks, things like how long a student spent viewing a particular page, or if they highlighted certain passages or made notes.
Wow, even that granular.
Potentially, yes. And also things like responses from quick polling apps used during class. Basically, any digital touch point where the student is interacting with learning material can potentially feed data into this central AI hub.
So step one is getting all those puzzle pieces out of the different rooms and into one single box on the table.
A very good analogy. It breaks down those data silos automatically.
Okay, makes sense. So now the AI has gathered all this diverse data. What does it do with it? How does it actually track student progress in a way that's different from just looking at test scores periodically? That's our next question from the source.
Right. Once the data is aggregated, the second key function kicks in, tracking progress in real time. And this is a really fundamental shift. Instead of those occasional snapshots, test here, quiz there, the AI builds a continuous, dynamic, evolving profile for each student.
Like a live feed instead of just photos.
Exactly like that. It tracks their understanding, their mastery of individual skills and concepts over time. So the teacher isn't just seeing isolated data points, they're seeing trends, trajectories.
How detailed can this tracking get?
Very detailed. The source talks about tracking progress on a really granular level. So the system doesn't just note if a student eventually passed a topic. It can monitor their initial attempt on a concept, see how many practice problems it took them to reach proficiency, maybe even track the speed of their correct responses.
Okay, that's interesting.
And critically, it can track retention. How well are they holding on to that knowledge weeks or months later when related concepts come up? Is the understanding sticking? It provides this multidimensional view that goes way beyond a simple percentage score.
That sounds much richer. If you're tracking at that level of detail, it feels like you could get much better at pinpointing exactly where a student is going wrong. Which leads nicely to the next question from the source. How precisely can these AI systems diagnose learning gaps compared to, the traditional methods?
This is really where the AI offers immense value, according to the source. This third step is identifying learning gaps with precision. Because it has all that aggregated data and it's tracking performance constantly and granularly, it can do much more than just flag a wrong answer.
How so? Give us an example.
Well, the source uses the fraction example again, which is great. The AI can help differentiate between fundamentally different problems that might lead to the same wrong answer on a test. Is the student struggling because they just don't get the concept of what a fraction even is? Or do they understand the concept fine, but they consistently make mistakes when trying to simplify fractions? Or maybe it's only when adding fractions with different denominators. The AI, by analyzing their performance across many different types of fraction problems, can pinpoint this specific subskill or foundational concept that's the actual barrier. It enables this kind of concept-level diagnosis.
That's a huge difference for a teacher trying to help, knowing what specific microskill needs work.
Absolutely. And it goes even deeper. The source mentions that by analyzing patterns of errors, maybe seemingly different mistakes across multiple problems, the AI can sometimes uncover hidden misconceptions. These are sort of underlying flawed ways of thinking or misunderstandings that aren't immediately obvious from looking at one or two answers.
Like a faulty piece of logic they keep applying.
Exactly. A teacher, reviewing manually, might easily miss that deeper pattern. But the AI, crunching all that data, can connect the dots and highlight that underlying issue that needs addressing. It sees the forest and the trees.
Fascinating. Okay, so it tracks progress continuously. It diagnoses current gaps with real precision. Now, the source mentions something even more powerful, predicting future problems. This sounds almost like science fiction. How does that work? That's our next big question.
Yeah, this predictive capability is definitely one of the most talked about aspects and potentially one of the most impactful. The fourth step described is predicting future challenges. Essentially, the AI tries to act as an early warning system.
An early warning for what?
For students who are likely to struggle down the road, the AI analyzes a student's entire learning trajectory up to that point. It looks at their pace of learning, their engagement levels, are they logging in, are they completing activities, their historical areas of difficulty, and really importantly, their mastery of prerequisite knowledge.
Ah, so if you didn't quite get algebra, you're probably going to struggle with calculus.
Precisely. The AI understands those dependencies. So if it sees a student consistently struggled with foundational concepts in Unit 3, and it knows those concepts are essential for success in Unit 5, which starts next month, it can flag that student as being at high risk for struggling in Unit 5.
Before they even start it.
Ideally, yes. Using machine learning models trained on lots of student data, the system can calculate a probability that a student might fail an upcoming exam or fall behind in the next major topic based on their current profile and historical performance.
Wow.
The goal is proactive at-risk identification. It alerts the teacher before the student hits a wall, before they actually fail or get significantly lost. This is huge because it allows the teacher to shift from that reactive mode, trying to catch students up after they've fallen behind, to a proactive one, providing support before the struggle becomes acute.
That changes the whole dynamic, doesn't it? Moving from rescue missions to prevention.
That's the idea, the fundamental shift in approach.
Okay, so the AI is providing all this insight, real-time tracking, precise diagnosis, even predictions. Let's connect this back to the teacher in the classroom. Our next question is, how does having access to this kind of information actually empower educators? How does it change what they do day to day? Let's start with intervention.
Right, because insights without action aren't very useful. The source emphasizes that these AI-driven insights directly translate into more effective teaching practices. The first major impact is enabling early and targeted intervention. Meaning, when the AI flags that a specific student is struggling with, say, simplifying fractions right now, based on their homework attempts last night, the teacher doesn't have to wait 2 weeks for a quiz score. They know immediately.
And they know what the issue is.
Exactly. They know who is struggling and what they're struggling with. So the intervention can be immediate and precise. Maybe it's just a quick, focused one-on-one check-in during independent practice time. Or maybe the AI even suggests specific practice exercises tailored to that exact skill gap, which the teacher can assign with a click.
Or maybe grouping students.
Yes. Perhaps the AI identifies 3 students all having the same issue with fraction simplification. The teacher can then pull just those 3 students together for a quick, focused mini-lesson while the rest of the class works on something else. The intervention is timely, specific, and based on solid evidence.
That sounds incredibly efficient compared to trying to figure all that out on the fly. Does this data also help teachers adjust their plans for the whole class or maybe for different groups within the class? That's our next question.
Absolutely. It's not just about individual students. The AI insights are also powerful for differentiating and adjusting teaching strategies at a larger scale.
How does that work for the whole class?
Well, imagine the dashboard shows that, say, 70% of the class really struggled with a specific concept on the previous night's online assignment. That's immediate, clear feedback to the teacher.
Okay. So maybe my explanation yesterday wasn't clear enough, or maybe the activity didn't quite work.
Exactly. It signals that a whole class adjustment might be needed. Maybe the teacher decides to reteach that concept the next day using a completely different approach or a different analogy, or maybe find a better video resource. It allows for data-informed adjustments to core instruction based on collective understanding, or lack thereof.
Makes sense. And what about for smaller groups? You mentioned grouping students with similar struggles.
Yes, the AI can make small group work much more purposeful. Instead of just grouping students somewhat randomly or based only on general ability levels, the teacher can use the AI insights to create groups based on very specific shared misconceptions or skill gaps. So one group might work on simplifying fractions, another might focus on adding them, and so on. Highly targeted remediation.
And presumably you could also group students who are ready for more challenge.
Definitely. The AI can also identify students who have already mastered the current material and are ready for enrichment or extension activities. This allows the teacher to differentiate effectively at both ends of the spectrum, providing support where needed and challenge where appropriate.
So it really facilitates that personalized learning idea.
It does. And the source mentions a couple of other related benefits too. This data can lead to more effective communication. Imagine a parent-teacher conference where the teacher can show specific data points about progress, strengths, and pinpointed areas for growth.
Much more concrete than just saying needs improvement.
Right. And similarly, having specific data can make conversations with the students themselves more focused and productive. Plus, on a larger scale, if you aggregate anonymized data across many classrooms or schools, it can guide professional development. If the data shows, for example, that students consistently struggle with a particular science standard across the district, that might signal a need for more teacher training or better resources in that specific area.
Okay, so the impact is potentially quite broad, from individual interventions to system-level improvements. Let's visualize this a bit. The source talks about an educator's AI dashboard. Can you paint a picture for us? What might a teacher actually see on their screen? That's our next question.
Sure. Imagine logging in and seeing a kind of mission control for your classroom's learning. The source suggests several features you'd likely find.
Like what?
Well, probably a main class overview screen. Maybe using simple color codes, green, yellow, red, next to each student's name to give an instant visual cue of who's generally on track, who needs watching, and who might be at significant risk based on the AI's analysis. A quick pulse check.
Okay, like a weather map for the class.
Sort of, yeah. And crucially, you'd be able to drill down from that overview, click on any student's name, and you'd get their detailed individual profile. Their specific strengths and weaknesses, their learning history on different concepts, maybe even how they interacted with specific resources.
So you can go from the big picture to the fine details.
Exactly. The dashboard would likely include visualizations too, maybe charts showing a student's progress on mastering a particular concept over the last few weeks. Are they showing steady growth? Have they plateaued? Are they dipping? Making the trends visible.
Data viz is always helpful.
And you'd probably get automated alerts. Pop-up notifications if, say, a student who's usually very active suddenly shows a sharp drop in engagement with the online materials. Or an alert if the predictive algorithm flags a student as being at high risk for an upcoming test. Proactive nudges.
Things the teacher needs to know now.
Right. And something very practical the source mentions is maybe a list highlighting the most commonly misunderstood concepts or questions from the latest homework assignment the class completed. So the teacher walks in the next morning already knowing, okay, question 3 tripped up half the class. I need to address that right away.
That would save a lot of guesswork.
Absolutely. The whole point of the dashboard, as the source presents it, is to make that often invisible, complex process of student learning visible, tangible, and most importantly, actionable for the teacher in near real time.
It sounds incredibly powerful, almost like giving teachers superpowers to see inside students' heads, in a way.
In a data-driven way, yes.
But with great power comes great responsibility, right? Anytime you're dealing with this much data, especially about kids, there have to be significant concerns and potential downsides. This brings us to the really critical questions about challenges and ethics. What does the source say are the key issues, starting with things like data privacy, the risk of labeling kids, and potential bias in the algorithms?
Oh, absolutely. The source dedicates significant attention to this, and rightly so. These are not trivial concerns. They're central to whether this technology is ultimately beneficial or harmful.
So, number 1.
Data privacy and security. This is paramount. We're talking about highly sensitive information about individual students' learning processes, their struggles, their pace. Protecting this data is non-negotiable. That means incredibly robust security protocols for how the data is collected, where it's stored, who can access it, and for how long it's kept.
And compliance with laws, presumably?
Absolutely. Strict compliance with all relevant privacy regulations, like GDPR or specific laws in places like Canada, is essential. But beyond just legal compliance, the source stresses the need for transparency. Students and parents need to understand clearly what data is being collected, why it's being collected, and how it will be used. Building and maintaining trust is fundamental.
Makes sense. What about the at-risk flags? You mentioned earlier that predicting struggles could be ethically sensitive.
Yes, that leads to the second major concern, the risk of reductive labeling. Those predictive algorithms, while potentially very helpful for triggering support, also carry a real danger. If a student is flagged as at risk, How is that label used?
Right. Does it become a self-fulfilling prophecy?
That's the fear. If teachers, even subconsciously, lower their expectations for a student labeled at risk, or if that label follows the student around, it could inadvertently limit their opportunities or damage their self-perception. The source is very clear. These insights must be used to unlock support and potential, not to stereotype, pigeonhole, or limit students. It requires real wisdom and care in interpretation and communication.
So the prediction needs to open doors, not close them.
Precisely. And then there's the thorny issue of algorithmic bias. This is a huge challenge across many AI applications, and education is no exception.
How does bias creep in here?
Well, these AI models learn from data, usually historical data. If that historical data reflects existing societal inequities, maybe students from certain backgrounds historically had less access to resources or faced biases in grading or attended under-resourced schools, the AI might learn those patterns.
And perpetuate them.
Exactly. It might learn to associate certain demographic factors with lower performance, not because of inherent ability, but because of historical disadvantage reflected in the training data. This could lead to the algorithm being systematically less accurate for certain groups, maybe over-flagging them as at risk based on bias patterns, or maybe under-recognizing the potential of students who don't fit the historical mold. It's a serious risk that could actually worsen inequities if not actively monitored and mitigated.
Wow. Okay, so privacy, labeling, bias, those are huge technical and ethical hurdles. What about the human side of things? Our final questions touch on this. Does the source talk about the skills teachers need to actually use this data effectively? And is there a danger we start focusing only on the things AI can easily count, missing the bigger picture of education?
Yes, these are equally critical points that the source raises, focusing on the human interaction with the technology. Firstly, there's the crucial need for data literacy for educators.
Meaning teachers need to become data scientists.
Not necessarily data scientists, but they need to be comfortable and critical users of this data. Just dropping a complex dashboard filled with charts and metrics onto a teacher's desk isn't helpful if they don't know how to interpret it properly, or if they take the numbers too literally without context.
So training is key.
Significant training and ongoing professional development, yes. Teachers need skills to understand what the data actually signifies, its limitations, potential biases, and most importantly, how to integrate those insights with their own professional judgment, their knowledge of the individual student, and their pedagogical expertise. The AI provides data. The teacher provides the wisdom to use it effectively and compassionately.
Got it. And the risk of focusing too narrowly.
That's the second major human-side concern, focusing only on what's easily measurable. AI is great at quantifying things like scores, completion rates, time spent on task, number of attempts. Those are relatively easy data points to collect and analyze.
But education is more than that.
So much more. The source explicitly warns against letting the easily quantifiable metrics overshadow the less tangible but equally vital aspects of development. Things like creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, communication skills, ethical reasoning, problem-solving on complex open-ended tasks, resilience, curiosity, social-emotional growth.
Things that are hard for an algorithm to score.
Exactly. There's a real risk that if we rely too heavily on AI analytics, the curriculum and teaching might start to narrow, focusing only on the skills and knowledge that generate good data for the system at the expense of fostering well-rounded human beings. We need to consciously safeguard against that.
That's a really important caution, and related to that.
Well, there's the potential impact on surveillance and student well-being as students feel like every single click, every pause, every mistake they make in a digital environment is being constantly monitored, recorded, and judged by an algorithm. How does that affect their learning?
It could create a lot of pressure, maybe anxiety.
It could. It might make students afraid to take risks, to experiment, to ask dumb questions, or even just to explore tangents out of curiosity because they're worried about how it will look in their data profile. There's a potential chilling effect on genuine inquiry and intellectual playfulness if the environment feels too much like constant surveillance. We need to think about the psychological impact on students.
So many layers of challenges to consider alongside the potential benefits. Okay, let's try to bring this all together. Based on everything discussed in the source, the capabilities, the benefits, the significant challenges, what's the ultimate vision presented for the role of AI analytics in education looking ahead from June 2025?
Well, the source concludes on a note of, I'd say, conscious optimism. It sees AI analytics as fundamentally reshaping educational assessment, moving it away from being this series of static, isolated snapshots.
Like the old tests and quizzes.
Right. And transforming it into a dynamic, continuous stream of insights that flows throughout the learning process.
A live feed, like you said.
Exactly. And by providing that real-time tracking, that precise gap diagnosis, and those predictive capabilities, AI gives educators a level of understanding about individual student learning journeys that was simply impossible before.
And the key outcome of that understanding?
The key outcome is empowerment. Empowering teachers to shift from being primarily reactive, dealing with problems after they're entrenched, to being truly proactive, enabling that early, targeted intervention, facilitating much more personalized instruction tailored to individual needs, providing timely support for every learner, helping more students succeed. The source definitely frames this as a potentially powerful tool for advancing both excellence and equity in education.
Especially in diverse systems like here in Canada, where student needs can vary so widely.
Precisely. But, and this is the crucial but, that the source hammers home this power must be wielded responsibly. The commitment to watertight data privacy, the constant vigilance required to identify and mitigate algorithmic bias, ensuring the insights are always used in a supportive, constructive way. These aren't optional add-ons. They are fundamental prerequisites for ethical and effective implementation.
So it's not about AI taking over.
Absolutely not. The vision presented is definitively not about replacing teachers. It's about AI emerging as that indispensable co-pilot.
The co-pilot handles the complex navigation, the data crunching.
Exactly. It takes on the heavy lifting of data analysis, pattern recognition, information synthesis tasks that are incredibly time-consuming and difficult for humans to do at scale. And by doing that, it frees up the teacher.
Frees them up for what?
Frees them up to focus on what humans do best. The deeply human, nuanced, and utterly irreplaceable work of teaching. Building relationships, sparking curiosity, mentoring, providing emotional support, facilitating rich discussions, inspiring creativity. All the things that algorithms can't replicate. That's the provocative thought the source leaves us with. AI as the tool that lets teachers be more human, not less.
The educator's co-pilot, handling the data so the teacher can focus on the art and heart of teaching. That's a compelling vision for the future. Well, that brings us to the end of this particular deep dive, exploring how AI is aiming to transform teaching through data based on the insights from the educator's co-pilot.
It's been a fascinating look, hasn't it? We really hope this discussion, curated for you, has given you a much clearer picture of the incredible potential here, but also a sober understanding of the very real challenges and ethical tightropes we need to walk.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you found this valuable and want to keep exploring these critical intersections of technology, AI, and our future, please do subscribe and follow our channel, Tech, AI, and Beyond. We'll keep digging into the sources to bring you the core insights.